In lab this week, you're going to be testing the accuracy of volumetric measurements. You're going to be testing the accuracy of graduated cylinders, serological pipetters, and micropipetters. And the way the experiment is going to work is that you are going to have a specific volume of liquid, of water, that you are intending, that you are trying to dispense. So you're going to measure as carefully as possible 43 milliliters of water in a graduated cylinder. Now, before you do that, you're going to take a 50 ml beaker, that's your container, and you're going to weigh it empty. Then you're going to use this graduated cylinder and you're going to try to measure as carefully as possible 43 milliliters of water, and you're going to pour that into the container. And then after that, you're going to weigh the container again, and you can subtract the weight of the empty container to get the weight, or the mass I should be saying, of the liquid that you added. And you're going to do the same thing with a serological pipetter. You're going to take your container, that's the beaker, and you're going to weigh it before you add any water. Then you're going to use the serological pipetter to add, this is your intended volume, what you're trying to add, 3.7 milliliters of liquid. And then you're going to weigh the container again after you've added the water to it. And so now you can do the subtraction and you can figure out the mass of the water that you added. And finally, you're going to do this a third time, except this time the container is not a 50 ml beaker, but it is a microcentrifuge, very small microcentrifuge tube. You're going to weigh it before, that's your container, and then you're going to use your micropipetter to dispense as carefully as possible 153 microliters. And then you're going to weigh the container again and do the subtraction and determine the mass of the water that you actually added to the container. Now, the trick here is that the electronic balances to weigh the mass of the water that you added are much more accurate than any of those volumetric dispensers. Furthermore, we know that 1 milliliter of water equals 1 gram. So that when you figure out the mass of the water that you've actually added to each one of those containers, then you can easily figure out what volume you actually added. So for example, if you determine that you've actually added 4.2 grams of water, well, that means you've added 4.2 milliliters. And then using that, using the data that you get from the electronic balance as the sort of golden standard of what you've actually added, then you can figure out what your accuracy was with each one of those volumetric devices. And you do that by taking the intended volume of water minus the actual volume that you got from the mass, divided by the intended volume times 100, and that will be your percent error.